During Elizabethan England, a time when England struggles to hold influence overseas, Francis Drake is born at the Crownsdale estate of Lord Francis Russell, 2nd Earl of Bedford, to her father, Edmund Drake. While she is born a woman, the eldest of 12 siblings, she is remembered historically as a man. Her father, Edmund, works as a live-in farmer for the Earl, also her godfather, and honorably named her after him. In the year 1549, however, either to avoid religious prosecution as a Roman Catholic or as a result of robbery and assault, Edmund flees from Devon to Kent. He is appointed as a minister to the King's Navy and entrusts Francis Drake to the tutelage of their neighbor, the master of a sailing vessel who transports merchandise to France. Under the shipmaster, Francis learns to handle the bark, and upon the shipmaster's death, she inherits it. Additionally, Francis has been raised in part by the Hawkins family in Plymouth, learning trade as a merchant as well as piracy. With such experience, she decides to enlist in the Hawkins fleet at the age of 18. Initially, she assists the fleet in plundering shipments along the French coast, but in the 1560s, she settles into African trade. By 1568, Francis Drake takes command of her own vessel, trading slaves in Spanish colonies of the Caribbean. She thrives in an age of exploration and expansion, with England at blows with Spain. Consequently, Drake and her companions frequently run into conflict with Spanish authorities. When voyaging to the West Indies, alongside fellow Admiral John Hawkins, their forces are attacked by the Spaniards, resulting in grave losses. Though she escapes, Drake vows to seek revenge upon Spain and its king, Philip II, by embarking on an expedition on board a small vessel, the Judith. In this endeavor, Drake networks with Queen Elizabeth I, who is also invested in slave trading. The two gather intelligence throughout the West Indies, but feuding with Spain proves difficult. In time, Drake is commissioned by the Queen to set sail for America in command of 2 ships, the Pasha and the Swan, on a mission to plunder Spanish lands in the area. Drake sets her sights on the town of Nombre de Dios, and in trying to claim it, is wounded. While the mission is ultimately a failure, Drake manages to return prosperous. During the assault, she raids a mule train loaded with 20 tons of silver and gold. Her crew, unable to carry the entire haul, buries much of it before dragging their spoils through 18 miles of jungle-covered mountains. When they reach the coast, they meet despair as their raiding boats have disappeared. Left vulnerable, with their enemy on the way, Francis Drake employs her charisma to rally her men. They bury the treasure and build a makeshift raft as she rides through 10 miles of rough coast to her flagship. Beaten and ragged, Drake stands upon the deck and reveals a necklace of Spanish gold, while ordering her ship to claim the rest of their stolen treasure. This haul serves as the foundation of Drake's amassing fortune. She crosses the Isthmus of Panama, and along the way, climbs a high tree, becoming the first Englishman to stare toward the Pacific Ocean. At this moment, she declares her next goal, to return to these Spanish-dominated seas upon an English vessel. Returning to England with her riches, Francis Drake is garnered with fame. Despite her ambition to forge into Spanish waters, she returns during a period of truce between Queen Elizabeth and King Philip II. At this time, her deeds cannot be officially recognized. Thus, she puts her conquest of Spain aside and instead sails to Ireland. There, she serves the Earl of Essex and takes part in its campaigns until 1577, when she is finally given her opportunity. Backed by the Queen, Francis Drake is chosen to lead an expedition to the unexplored coast beyond South America through the Strait of Magellan. This expedition allows her to serve the Queen, as well as feed her thirst to ravage the Spaniards. For the first time, she meets the Queen in person and is promised vengeance on the King of Spain for her injuries. While the mission is to expand oceanic travel routes, Drake unofficially focuses on piracy. With nearly 200 men, split between 5 ships, she departs in December and reaches the coast of Brazil the following spring. Her flagship, the Golden Hind, is relatively small, posing a challenge in proceeding further against the world's most powerful empire. Even worse, she struggles with insubordination. Following in the steps of Ferdinand Magellan, Drake makes landfall at San Julian, where she discovers unreliable officers led by Thomas Doughty. She tries, convicts, and executes them for plotting against her. She refuses to proceed without absolute loyalty. To ensure this, she abandons 2 ships before entering the Strait of Magellan. At the end of a 16-day travel, Francis Drake once again gazes upon the Pacific Ocean, this time in command of a worthy vessel, only to encounter an intolerable tempest that separates the Hind from her second-best vessel. Her other ships miss their rendezvous and presume the Hind is sunk, leaving Francis Drake's flagship on its own heading into the Pacific. The Spaniards, not expecting a hostile ship in their waters, are caught off guard, allowing Drake to plunder resources from merchants. Among them, 2 of the captured vessels carry gold, silver, pearls, and Spanish coins. Her voyage brings her parallel to Canada at the Northwest Passage, back to the Atlantic Ocean, where she is halted by the harsh cold. Taking a detour, she anchors near present-day San Francisco, where she claims the surrounding country under the name New Albion. Come July of 1579, she ventures west toward the Philippines and the Maluku Islands, buying spices from a sultan. Surrounded by uncharted ocean, the Hind strikes a reef, but Francis Drake's navigation and talented piloting help her avoid significant damage, allowing her to cross the Indian Ocean and eventually arrive back in the Atlantic. In 2 years' time, she has successfully circumnavigated the world, returning to Plymouth Harbor in 1580 with just over half the crew she departed with. Drake's treasure and spices cement her vast fortunes, and against Spanish protests, Queen Elizabeth personally boards the Golden Hind to bestow her as Sir Francis Drake and appoint her as Plymouth's mayor. This might seem spontaneous, but the Queen's share of the Hind's cargo by itself is more than the combined annual income of England. This fortune greatly assists England in establishing itself as a dominant nation. As a token of her journey, Drake gifts Elizabeth a jewel from the Pacific coast of Mexico. In turn, Elizabeth gives Drake a jewel with her portrait. Domestically, she takes to the task of mayor with diligence, establishing a water supply that lasts the city 300 years. In her position, she purchases a country house, Buckland Abbey, by deceiving pompous nobility. Unlike her born-into-wealth peers, Francis Drake lacks the manners and grace of nobility. After all, she is a libertine, casting aside societal morals and shackles to live by her own rules. Her experience on the open seas has led her to see no difference between a man of virtue and a deceptive scoundrel. While the nobility clings to their wealth, she pursues riches like the passing of a raging storm, gathering gold to scatter it. Thus, it makes sense that, regardless of her title, she still manages to gather volunteers for further expeditions, and these efforts pay off when Queen Elizabeth places her in command of a fleet to combat Spain once more. With 25 ships at her command, Drake causes as much damage as she is able, capturing Santiago and looting Cartagena, St. Augustine, and San Domingo. In warfare, Drake uses her Golden Hind to evolve combat beyond crashing into opposing ships to board them, by instead relying upon long-distance bombardments. It is even said that a cannonball fired at her ship manages to fly straight through her legs without injury. Soon, those that doubted her all concede that she is certainly a threat to the King of Spain. In 1586, Drake is given the chance to sabotage a massive fleet Philip II is preparing under the blessing of the Pope. Drake sails her own fleet, now of 30 ships, to Cadiz, and in 36 hours, decimates their forces and destroys supplies intended to serve the Armada. While this delays Spain's forces, they nonetheless bring their Armada to the English Channel within the year. To fight this invasion, Drake serves as Vice Admiral under Lord Howard of Effingham. With the coming of night, shrouded in darkness, she extinguishes the lanterns of her ship to sneak up on and commandeer the Spanish galleon Rosario. She then organizes fire ships to break the Spaniards' formation. The following day, she participates in the Battle of Gravelines, during which she boasts having ample time to play bowls before the Spanish fleet arrives. Her brave attitude towards the Spanish earns her the name El Drake, as a devilish dragon. Despite this, after a career in naval warfare with the starved attitude of a ferocious pirate, her final years prove detrimental. She fails in an expedition to Portugal, as well as against Spain and the West Indies. Tragically, she and much of her crew succumb to dysentery and perish in their endeavors. Just out from the town of Puerto Bello, Francis Drake is buried at sea. Even so, her military efforts allow England to eventually claim victory over the Spanish Armada. While clearly a woman, she is not treated as such. According to her own sailors, thinking of their captain as a woman would be rude towards her. Ironically, this just makes her a woman who is manlier than the men of her time. Her flagship, the Golden Hind, goes down in legend as a symbol of hope and source of miracles, and she herself is thought of in as high regard as King Arthur, both thought to dwell in Avalon after death. More importantly, the legend of Francis Drake is recorded into the Throne of Heroes. In the modern era, when humans take refuge in the moon cell, those seeking the Mooncell core enter into a deadly tournament known as the Mooncell Holy Grail War. One of the participants is an 8-year-old child named Shinji Mato. He is a video game champion who spent so much time immersed in virtual reality that his body required hospitalization. He takes to the challenge of the Holy Grail War after learning about it from a 78-hour online session. In the Mooncell, he uses the body of a teenager, and his memories are supplanted with those of a student. In the preliminaries leading up to the war, he spends his time at school and becomes quite popular. Among the other students, however, he is closest to Hakuno Kishinami. Their friendship is a core aspect of his pleasant school life. However, by the final day of the preliminaries, he regains his original memories, learning that Sakura is not his real sister. He summons a servant for the upcoming battles, and pulls Francis Drake as a rider-class heroic spirit. The two quickly form a functioning relationship, with Drake treating Shinji like a younger brother, correcting him on his behavior. She declares herself a villain, only interested in getting money, and is disappointed at Shinji's lack of wealth. Nonetheless, she agrees to fight for her master. In battle, Francis Drake wields 2 flintlock-style pistols that use mana for ammunition, allowing her to fire in rapid succession. Her skill, Helada Sol Poniendo, Big Sister's Resplendent Plunder, increases her attack power based on how much treasure they find in the arena. Beyond her pistols, she can materialize portions of a warship, firing cannons at her foes from the air. Above this is her noble phantasm, Golden Hind, her beloved flagship, which lets loose firepower from 4 artillery cannons and 14 other cannons lining the sides of the boat. She uses it to perform Golden Wild Hunt, the night of the Golden Hind in the storm, in which she employs a ghost fleet of the countless ships she commanded in life. It derives power from the Wild Hunt, a piece of European folklore in which various ghosts and demons sweep through as the night of the storm. Shinji's life is strained when, in the very first matchup, he is paired against his best friend Hakuno. Within a week's time, one of the two will die, while the other proceeds onward. Regardless, he is confident in his abilities and is driven by his childish ambition to obtain the Holy Grail. Throughout the week, Shinji tries to sabotage Hakuno's advance through the arena while hiding as much information about his own servant as possible. Shinji is driven by overconfidence, underestimating his opponent. Through this, Shinji offers Hakuno the chance to surrender, but Drake interferes, insisting on having an actual fight. Thus, when the elimination battle occurs on the week's final day, he slips up. Francis Drake, while certainly a powerful servant, fails to defeat Hakuno's servant. Furthermore, his best friend, Hakuno, proves to be the superior magus. Drake gracefully accepts her loss, admitting that nothing lasts forever. Sadly, as the arena's firewall encroaches upon him, Shinji screams that he doesn't want to die. Drake encourages Shinji to admit defeat, remarking that a villain's final moments should be spent laughing despite their misery. She smiles at Hakuno and urges them to become stronger as she and her master dissolve. In a separate universe, the Chaldea Security Organization attempts to thwart Getia's incineration of humanity by resolving various singularities throughout time. One such singularity occurs throughout an endless ocean, Okeanos, where Francis Drake thrives in her historical era, setting out on a voyage to Atlantis. There, she and her men manage to defeat the god Poseidon atop the Golden Hind and claim from him the genuine Holy Grail. With it, Drake gains enhanced physical abilities to rival heroic spirits. This grail attracts the attention of Chaldea's master, Ritsuka Fujimaru, and the two parties meet at Drake's hideout. Through conversation, it is made clear that Drake's grail is the genuine article, and not one of the 7 grails planted by Getia to cause the singularities. Regardless, Drake decides to help Ritsuka using her crew, ship, and individual combat prowess. Out on the open seas, Francis Drake and Ritsuka encounter other seafaring foes, from the sleazy Blackbeard to Jason on board the Argo. Jason, in possession of Getia's Holy Grail, seeks the Ark of the Covenant, thinking it will grant him ultimate power. He is misled, however, as reaching the Ark will mean the Singularity's destruction. Thus, to reclaim the Grail and halt Jason, Francis Drake employs her forces to slay Jason, who has taken the form of the demon god Pillar Fornius. Ritsuka's party achieves victory, recovering the Grail and resolving the Singularity in a stable form. Sadly, despite the time they fought together, Drake is fated to vanish along with Okeanos. While it's a final farewell for this Francis Drake, Ritsuka is able to summon a new instance of the pirate captain to Chaldea. All in all, Francis Drake may seem intimidating, but her craving for booty and adventure allows her to protect not only England, but also the entire world. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy this channel, help me beat the algorithm by liking, commenting, and sharing the video, subscribing to OtakuDaiKun, and most of all, smashing that notification bell as if it were your waifu. That way you'll never miss out on all of my anime content, lore videos, live streams, and Holy Waifu Wars polls. My vids are struggling to get featured, so that bell is absolutely critical. If you want to support me directly, check out my Patreon, or consider donating via Super Chat. And as always, celebrate your fandom.